Hey everyone, welcome to SGA Civic Engagement and Social Action Series. Today's conversation is sponsored by the Student Government Association and is co-sponsored by the Office of Student Involvement. It's designed for students to learn about how they can get engaged in important issues that affect the world around them. The views in today's conversation are the opinions of the panelists only, and they do not reflect the university. As part of this series, we're also encouraging students to register to vote. DePaul utilizes a platform called TurboVote to assist students in registering to vote no matter what state they live in. You can get registered by visiting depaul.turbovote.org. In addition to getting registered, you can also sign up to receive receive updates and reminders regarding deadlines for all elections in your area. With that, please join me in welcoming today's guest, the Executive Director of the Chicago Justice Project, Tracy Siska.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hi, thanks. We appreciate you coming and talking to us today. So the first question that I guess we had was, can you tell us about your experience working in the Chicago Justice Project and like kind of what your day-to-day life looks like, especially right now as it's, of course, changed with us being in the middle of a pandemic and then also a lot of social unrest and demand for justice?
Sure. So since basically the murder of George Floyd, obviously the demand on these issues and interest has exploded. And that is, we were in the process of starting to expand nationally our transparency work, which was focused primarily in Chicago. We've expanded throughout the state of Illinois, now going after the Illinois Department of Corrections to open them up, and soon the Illinois State Police. But now we've started, and we will by the beginning of next week be expanding to Washington, D.C., and then in weeks to follow, Dallas, Baltimore, and because of recent events in Louisville, Kentucky will be on that list shortly.
Oh, thank you. Ari?
Yeah. So just curious, since graduating college, have you encountered any obstacles and just things you didn't expect?
Oh God, sure. Too many to recount because I've been out of college way too long. Sure, I mean, that's part of everyday life. You don't get into this work without expecting obstacles. That is just the way it is. The system's set up to perpetuate what it's doing. And any challenge to that brings you man-made obstacles, natural obstacles, system obstacles, and you just have to find a way to overcome. Expecting no obstacles is just it's foolhardy in my perspective. I would tell everyone to expect obstacles and be prepared to overcome them. It's part and parcel of the work that you do. If you're going to do advocacy work, if you're going to do reform work, there are going to be obstacles, and that's the reason the work needs to be done.
I saw that you graduated from UIC, which isn't too far from us at DePaul. So how do you think that your hardships, I guess, that you faced from college and like graduating and your journey to where you are now, specifically being a student in Chicago, how has that differed, I guess, from other universities and other colleges?
Well, UIC's particularly, I went to undergrad at Loyola, so I did my grad work at UIC. So I'm on both ends of the city, or, I guess central city in the northern part. But UIC is particularly interesting because it's one of the most diverse universities in the country. So that brings a real, it brings a lot of different perspectives together, and that was, it's a great thing. And I cherish my grad school time. It really prepared me for what I do, and it exposed me to viewpoints and experiences that being a white guy in the north side of Chicago, growing up right by O'Hare Airport. I knew about, I had read about, but I had never experienced. And that's one great thing about UIC is just, the diversity that you find there.
Yeah, thank you. So I was just wondering if you could go into just a little more detail on what the mission of the Chicago Justice Program is and how you guys are working to support our communities here in Chicago.
Sure. So CJP is essentially focused on opening data from justice agencies. And until recently, it was just focused on Chicago. So we use advocacy, policy work, and mostly now litigation through the Illinois Freedom of Information Act to open data that the justice agencies create every day. So we are constantly in battle with one or more justice agencies at any one time. We view ourselves as providing what we provide the fuel for justice, and that we love the advocacy that's been going on, and we want advocates to be on the street, and we want them pushing. But from our perspective, we want the reforms that are being pushed to be evidence-based. There's a lot of things that we know, and when I say we, there's a lot of things that we've established in the justice system that is known through researchers that doesn't necessarily make it to communities. For instance, once you slap a pair of cuffs on a child, you have significantly altered the likelihood statistically that there will be justice system involved for the rest of their life. That is that would be, if it could ever make the press and make it out to the communities, would make a huge push and validation that we need to remove cops from schools, right? There's also things with use of force and other things like that that are known in research that aren't making it out to communities. We want to provide that bridge. We don't want to tell them what to advocate for, but we want to be able to provide that knowledge through advocacy and transparency and research.
Thank you. So one of the things you mentioned was getting cops out of schools. And I attended a CPS school. I went to Lane. And I know that was something that they had done recently. And I just wanted, I guess, what has your work been in helping out with that? I know that they're trying to also work with other CPS schools in removing cops.
Yeah, it's a very complicated issue. We're still fighting for the data that's going to help us be in a position to help those campaigns out. We're in litigation right now with the Chicago Police Department over violations of the Illinois Freedom of Information Act. And basically our role right now is to just keep advocating and keep litigating for the data. There is data to validate what's going on with those officers in the schools. The problem is CPS and the police department don't want to release it. And those are multi-year court fights. We are now 24 months, 26 months, 28 months in our litigation with the CPD, and there's really no end in sight for how long that's going to take.
Yeah, I just have a question. So how would you define justice, and like how has your definition of that changed in this like recent surge of the Black Lives Matter movement?
It's a very tough question, right? And when I say that, people, I think, because we have such a shallow media and we want to try to boil things down to the simplest answer, that everyone thinks that's simple. The problem, and I'm 100% on police accountability, and I have done a lot of my work has been on police accountability in Chicago, and I've been doing it since 1994. People have to understand that there are still people. Part of the problem with policing in Chicago, especially underserved communities, is there's a dual problem. There are two problems going on at the same time. They're both over-policed and under-policed. That means there's such a concentration on the drug war and shootings that they're not actually preventing crime the way they should. There are victimizations going on about violence against women, domestic violence, sexual assault, and other crimes that are still continuing to go on in these communities and aren't being prevented, stopped, slowed down by police. And then there's the other side, which is the police accountability over policing issues. So I think when you talk about what is justice, it's very complicated. And I think we've gotten America, Illinois, Cook County, Chicago, we're far too much about the punishment and not so much about what is in the best long-term interests of everyone. I remember when I was in retail, we've had people from time to time steal from us. And we would call the cops, and the cops would find the person, badge check, whatever, and say, go drop off the jewelry and they'll leave you alone. And the next day the jewelry would appear in our mailbox. And that to us was justice, because we just wanted everything back. The person going to prison or jail didn't do us any good. And unfortunately, one person didn't give it back. And one person did get prosecuted, and I both felt horrible about it, but it didn't make anyone better. It didn't make him better. It didn't make us as the business better, because we didn't get anything back. And so I think the answer is complicated. And I think part of the defund the police movement is having those conversations. What is justice around a whole host of issues around policing, crime, and violence? I think it's very important.
Yeah, I think those conversations, like you mentioned, are really important. They're hard because we all kind of differ with our desire of what justice should look like. I mean, something that popped into my head was, and it's something I think about a lot. I'm Filipino, so in the Philippines, they have their own like messed up justice system with the president there, who kind of is just, I don't know how to say it without explaining the whole ordeal, so I won't get into it.
They have very serious problems with the drug war and how it's fought there.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
the state and executions. So we can go on, but
Yeah.
that's the truth.
Yeah, it's executions, and it's really disgusting what's going on in the Philippines. And so it's weird because he believes that, and like listening to their own conversations and press releases, that's his vision of justice. It's just like executing people who have anything to do with drugs, which is really like scary. And then, yeah, just anyone who disagrees with him, he just kills them off. And I guess that's his like vision of justice. And so I like went off tangent, but my point is, I guess something that we're interested in is how do you approach those conversations and start to find like middle ground and dialogue with other people?
Sure. Well, first of all, we need a media that does their job better, and people who want to contact us or look on our website about our Justice Media Project. We have a huge issue with media reporting. We have a hyper concentration on gun violence, street violence, drugs. So that's a huge issue. The other thing is, I believe there was a massive, epic, world-renowned mistake by Lori Lightfoot not embracing the defund the police movement and starting that discussion virtually now and post-COVID in person in communities around the city to find out what communities' definitions of justice is, and starting that discussion about what we can do to realign how we police our city, who responds to domestic violence or domestic disturbance calls where there's no violence, mental health issues when there's no violence, drug issues where there's no violence. A whole host suite of calls could be put to another agency that is social service based completely, maybe with backup from police sitting a block or two away in case things get violent. Those things can happen, but only if that's driven by our leadership. And it's going to be very hard if our mayor and our city council are not doing it. And it's trying to be done from the community, but if you have a city council and a mayor that's totally ignoring it, I just don't see how it could happen in a thorough and responsible way.
Yeah, I definitely agree to that. I agree that it's really important to just look at like the systemic issues and like understanding like, yes, like looking at like crime rates and like seeing like how much crime there is, but we should also be asking more importantly, like, why is there so much crime in these communities and like what actionables we can be taking to like support them. And I think that's like the most important thing.
Right. And I'm a oddity when it comes to criminologists. My answers are not in the criminal justice system. If we look solely there, we have failed, and we will always fail in perpetuity for the rest of our lives and our kids' lives. It has to be around economics, right? I am convinced that if you put universal basic income in on Chicago's south and west sides, you would see a massive drop in crime and violence throughout the city, rather almost instantly. But that's not a conversation we're having. Instead, it's more police, more cops, more prisons, more jails, right? We won't defund the police. No one wants less cops. Well, if you provided people the ability to survive and have security in their housing and their lives, ability to get food, security in their medical care and their health, things would change significantly.
Yeah. Alyssa, do you want to go ahead and ask the next question?
Sure. So I just saw that we had a question come in, and the question is, how can someone become involved with the Chicago Justice Project?
Well, 24 hours from now, 5:45 in Chicago, so 24 hours and 45 minutes from now, CJP is hosting, it's basically the launch of our ambassador program, and we're going to bring volunteers We've been contacted by 3, 4, 5 a week since the George Floyd's horrific murder. So we're going to try to bring those people together to start an ambassador program where people can help us do crowdsourced research projects, to help expanding our voice on social media, to helping with Twitter storms and social media storms of public officials on public policy issues, on justice system issues. We're pushing an ordinance to realign how the city handles police civil misconduct cases and civil settlements. So we're trying to bring like-minded people together starting tomorrow night at 6:30 Central Time. And we will hopefully have a good turnout tomorrow, and that will be the start. We want to bring people together. We've had a big outcry, people wanting to get involved in what we do, and this is hopefully going to be our mechanism. On that post on our website there on the right, there's a Zoom link, and you can use that link to get in. It's Chicago Justice, on our Chicago Justice page. You can use that link to get in tomorrow night at 6:30 Central.
Cool, thank you. Something you also mentioned was the use of social media. So are the use of social media for like activism and things like that, how useful have you found it to be, especially as social media has increased in the past couple of years?
That's a wonderful question. It's complicated. We have seen for like very, very big nonprofits like Greenpeace and nonprofits that size, they have been able to spend the money and resources to find it very useful. But people have to understand there's a difference between clicking like and actually supporting an organization or supporting a mission and getting involved. Likes are great, but they're not actually truly getting involved. You have to make the next step. You have to take that next step. And so it's hard, and it's a struggle for nonprofits across the board in all kinds of fields to find a way to use social media effectively to help your mission. It's complicated. We just recently got on Instagram, so we're proceeding. We're trying to use them all as best as we can.
Yeah, Instagram is definitely my go-to for just absorbing stuff. And I think it's a great way to just like mobilize young people and just connect with them. So with that, why do you think it's important for young people to understand civic engagement and social action?
Sure. I think there's a belief that that Americans have been pushed. It's much less hard, if that's a way of saying it. It's a lot less hard to motivate officials to do what you want them to do if you just get involved. Putting 100 people, 200 people, 300 people at your congressman's office, day in it for a few days, and getting the media to cover it is going to get you attention, right? And there's a line in the West Wing, which I've been streaming with my wife during the pandemic here. Things are done by those who show up. And if you sit at home and you don't do anything and all you do is complain and you don't vote and you don't get involved and you don't support advocacy organizations, I don't know what leg you have to complain, right? What gives you the right, besides just being an American, I guess, to complain, right? If you get involved and vote for the right people, I think specifically in Chicago, there's far too little engagement of their local politicians. There's far too little advocacy pushing their aldermen and the Cook County commissioners and the mayor to do things. That is where I think you can have the most impact. And really in the 80s and 90s, that's where conservatives went. They left the national level. They didn't leave it, but they expanded to going on, who's on a local school council, who's on a local school board, all of those things. You got to start from the ground up and build, but it only be done by those who show up.
So what advice do you have for college students looking to get civically engaged, maybe for the first time?
There's a lot of, obviously I want you to do the Chicago Justice Project, but there's a lot of nonprofits doing a whole host of activities around crime, violence, justice issues, but any issue. Get involved, make a call, send an email, see how you can help out. Start clubs. I would love a Chicago Justice Club at universities, across the universities in Chicago and beyond. That would be awesome. But it's about getting involved and stepping forward and sending that email and dedicating a few hours a week, not huge amounts of time, but a few hours a week to doing something. But it all takes the first step and a little bit of a commitment and a willingness to learn about what actually needs to be done.
Thank you. You also mentioned, of course, the Chicago Justice Project. So could you share a little bit about your sites and where people can find out more?
Sure. So chicagojustice.org is our main website. And if you're interested in getting involved, on the contact page, there's a form you can fill out and it gets right to me. You'll get to me in about 10 seconds, maybe less, but then you can go there and find out more information. If you're interested in some of our transparency work, cpbinfocenter.org is our police board website. There you go. We also have one on our Justice Media Project, which is data.chicagojustice.org. And that's basically a back end, but it's the beginning of our media monitoring project we're building in Chicago. So you can get information about what we do at any of those sites. If you want to support us financially, we have a Patreon page too you can go to and get, that's a monthly giving program, but you get behind the scenes access to updates, strategy of what we're doing, our FOIAs, where we're expanding our work across the country. You'll get behind the scenes access from there.
Cool, thank you. Ari, did you have any other questions?
No, I think I got them all answered.
Cool, thank you. Thank you, Tracy, for joining us. And for everyone who's watching, SGA meets weekly on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And yeah, follow us on social media and join us next Tuesday. And remember to vote.
Yeah, please vote. Alyssa, Ari, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for talking to us. Yeah.